And now to news from West Asia. Israel has launched a military operation in Jenin, that's a city in West Bank. And this is not just any other operation, it's one of the biggest that West Bank has seen in the last 20 years. So first, a rundown of what happened. This morning, Israel launched a series of drone attacks. They were targeting an apartment. It's located in the center of Jenin's refugee camp. It first attacked with drones. And then came the ground forces. Soon, the sound of gunfire filled the streets of Jenin. Israel says it was targeting militants. It claims to have struck a command center for a militant group.
We are striking the terrorism hub with a great strength. I want to emphasize that we don't have a fight with the Palestinians. Actually, our fight is with the proxies of Iran in our region, which is mainly with the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad.
Palestine, on the other hand, calls it a war crime, an attack on defenseless people.
Our people will not stand down or surrender. We will remain in confrontation until this criminal occupation is over. The crimes in Jenin, Nablus and Gaza will not bring security to Israel as long as it attacks our people and works against the course of history.
8 people have been killed. The death toll is mounting. 50 others are injured. These are scenes we've seen before in Gaza. But for Jenin, this is the first in 2 decades, the biggest attack since the second intifada, or the second uprising. It started in the city's refugee camp. Around 14,000 people live there. In the last year, it has seen a lot of Israeli raids, but this time, residents say it looks like a real war.
What's going on in the refugee camp is real war. There were strikes from the sky targeting the camp. Every time we drive in, around 5 to 7 ambulances, and we come back full with injured people.
Israel argues the action was unavoidable. They apparently put off this operation for 2 years, but not anymore. They even had a discussion with the US. Reports say Washington was informed 10 days ahead of the raid. And no surprises there. Even though Washington does not approve of Israel's latest policies, including their settlement plans, America remains Israel's staunchest ally. And the recent tensions have not stopped Tel Aviv from acquiring a new fleet of F-35 jets. This is the world's most advanced stealth fighter jet. Israel will buy its 3rd fleet from the US. The deal is worth $3 billion, and it will be funded by US military aid. It's a win-win for Tel Aviv. In fact, Israel is the only country with F-35s in West Asia. It already has 50 F-35 jets, 50. This time, it's buying 25 more. So it will now have a fleet of 75 jets. The UAE wanted the same jets, but they don't have a deal yet. It just shows how close US-Israel ties are, irrespective of the differences. So Israel is expanding its arsenal, and it comes at a time when tensions with Iran are at an all-time high. On Sunday, Israel conducted an airstrike in Syria too. The attack was to counter Iran's presence there, disrupt its alleged arms supply to its allies in Syria. And Israel used the F-35 to shoot Iranian drones. It has used the F-35 before. In 2022, Israeli F-35s breached Iran's airspace. It gives Israel an edge in its battle against Iran. Will it target Iran's nuclear facilities next? Well, that's something we will keep tracking. France is burning. I'm afraid there's no other way to put it. Vehicles are being torched on the streets, barricades have been destroyed, shops have been stormed and looted. It's like one of those zombie movies. This is what Champs-Élysées looks like. It's the most famous avenue in Paris, but yesterday it was a semi-war zone. The place is crawling with cops in full riot gear. Some armored vehicles have also been deployed. The scene is no different elsewhere. In Lyon, in Marseille, in Angers, Put together, 45,000 police officers have been deployed, around 3,000 people have been arrested, and internet shutdown is likely. The French Home Ministry is circulating an order. It says internet will be curbed starting today. They say it will prevent the misuse of social media platforms, and thank God it's in Europe. If it was elsewhere, it would have been a human rights violation, but in France, it's a precaution. Over the weekend, the scenes were ugly. Entire residential apartments were set on fire. In Lyon, shops were looted and vandalized. The police responded with tear gas and batons. The images show you how serious things are and the sort of anger there is within the French society. Yesterday night, a mayor's house in Paris was attacked. A burning car rammed into the building. The mayor's wife and child were injured.
We are not asking for unanimity, but I would never have imagined my family would be threatened with death and that there would be an assassination attempt in this beautiful commune.
The question is, how long will this continue? It's been 5 nights of non-stop violence. It all started with the killing of 17-year-old Nahel Merzouk. He was of Algerian and Moroccan descent, and he was shot during a traffic stop. The incident has exposed France's deep-rooted racism, hence the violent reaction. Nahel's funeral was on Saturday. His grandmother later had a message for all the protesters. Stop the violence, she said. Listen to this.
I blame the police officer who killed my grandson. The people who are breaking things, I ask them, stop it. They are using my grandson as a pretext. No, people, just stop it. They should stop. They should not break store windows, and they should not be ransacking schools.
We know how these things pan out. Yes, Nahel was the trigger, but the issue goes beyond just one person or cop, like the George Floyd killing in the US. So how is President Macron planning to handle it? Well, he's cleared his schedule. The state visit to Germany has been cancelled for one. He's also met the top ministers in his government to take stock of the situation. On Tuesday, Macron will meet 220 mayors. All of them represent towns worst hit by the riots. So that's the tactical response. But what about the political one? Macron may have condemned the police shooting of Nahel, but look at his statements afterwards. He says the rioters are young and misguided. He also says video games are contributing to the violence. Perhaps both are true. But if he thinks Call of Duty is to blame for this, he's going to have a tough time. Because there is underlying anger and underlying racism. Whether Macron likes it or not, his country is deeply divided. Chances are those divisions have grown this weekend because rioting was the red line for most people. Listen to some of them.
Very glad it is calming down, and at the same time I'm not very happy about everything we've been through, because there are people, we don't know how they managed to get their cars, their store, maybe they also took loans for what they had, and then all it takes is one night of trouble and they've lost everything. It's not their fault, everything that happened.
They are breaking things just to break things. They want to spread terror, attack elected officials and try to put the republic in danger. But I don't think they had their target on one particular individual or mayor.
This is arguably Macron's biggest test. He was voted to power as a centrist, as the man who would unite France and Europe. But now his own country is up in flames. So what will the president do next? We got a glimpse into his mindset during the pension protest. Massive outrage, but no U-turn. Macron stuck with the law despite the backlash. Will he do the same here? Well, looking at his track record, it's possible. Macron's policy on immigration and Islam has been controversial, also contradictory. He's talked about tackling radicalism, which is great, but his tactics are not helping. The French president says Islam as a religion is in crisis. Then he goes on to defend insults to the Prophet and cracks down on all mosques. Critics say this is a classic case of attacking Islam and not Islamic extremism. Plus, Macron seems disconnected with the ground reality. There are deep divisions in French society, fears about ethnic and demographic changes from migration. I'll give you an example. Some people have set up a fundraiser for the cop who shot Nahel. Think about that, a fundraiser for the man who may have started all of this. And guess how much money it's got? Almost €1 million. So don't think there is no counter sentiment. There are long-standing fears among the white population of France. As president, it is Macron's job to resolve them, to address these fears, to heal his country and his population. If not, this violence will keep flaring up. Macron could become the unique centrist who ended up dividing rather than uniting. Countries around the world are watching these events closely, including the Indian government. You see, Prime Minister Modi is expected to visit France next week. He's the chief guest for the Bastille Day event on the 14th of July. So far, there's been no change to the schedule, but a lot depends on how this week plays out. If the violence escalates again, all bets are off. So France is burning, but where did the spark come from? Last week's shooting was certainly the trigger, but the embers were already smoking by then. Why? Because of immigration. And try to understand this beyond the left-right binary. France's demography has changed a lot in the last decades. Today, there are 7 million immigrants in this country. That's around 10% of the population. So take 10 people and one of them will be an immigrant. Now, the concept itself is old in France. People began steadily migrating there by the 1830s. In the 20th century, it was considered the most open country in Europe, open arms, open borders. Many of these migrants came from French colonies, like Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. During the World Wars, France needed more manpower, so in came the migrants. But this was a colonial relationship. France was the all-conquering, civilizing power. The Arab and African migrants were just labor. It wasn't a relationship of equals. And this attitude is at the root of today's problems. Because France has never apologized for its colonial past. It hasn't accepted war crimes in North Africa, nor has it agreed to pay reparations. So in their mind, there is no problem. They say France is the land of equality, liberty, and fraternity, the temple of civil rights. Surely such a country doesn't have discrimination. Most French leaders believe this. I'll give you an example. In France, it's illegal to conduct census or surveys based on race and religion. Why? Because apparently the society is colorblind. But you see, to solve a problem, you must first acknowledge it. And France isn't doing that. By 1975, around 6% of their population was of foreign origin. They were immigrants. And that share did not change for 25 years. But in the 21st century, there was rapid growth. As I mentioned, the share is now 10%. So there was zero change from 1975 to 2000, and then a 4-point rise in the next 23 years. Where did these people come from? Around 13% of them are of Algerian descent, 12% are from Morocco, 4.4% from Tunisia, and 3.8% from Turkey. So these are all non-white people, most of them Arabic, African, and Muslim. And don't think these people barged in without invites. France needed these migrants. A 2022 report claimed around 400,000 jobs are vacant in the country because there is no one to work. Why do you think Macron increased the retirement age? Because there is a labor shortage. That was one of the reasons. So France needed the foreign labor, which is why millions of people migrated in the last 2 decades. Plus, you have illegal migration. Not everyone takes the legal route into France. Many sneak in and live as undocumented migrants. There were around 200,000 of them in 2014. Now there are more than 400,000. Most of them live in close-knit communities doing odd jobs. This year, France passed a new immigration law. It's centrist, just like President Macron. It makes legalization of undocumented migrants easier. At the same time, it bolsters deportations at the border. So that's how so many migrants landed up in France. The next step was assimilation, to integrate these migrants into the French society and nation, and that is where they failed. You see, there are 2 kinds of societies in the world. One where diversity is accepted and promoted. Countries like the United States and India. You can lead your life based on your culture. Then there are places where one size fits all, like France. It doesn't matter if you're an African Muslim or an Arab immigrant. You must change your culture to live in France. You must become a so-called Frenchman. Obviously, not everyone is interested. And this has led to continued alienation of immigrants. It has created a divide. Other European countries have fared better, relatively better. Germany, for instance, has around 24% immigrant population. Yet their integration has gone relatively well. So that's one part of the problem. The immigrants are not integrated in the society. The other part is a growing fear among the white French population. Many of them are living in insecurity. What if they become a minority in their own country? What if France becomes a Muslim country? These fears are widespread, and they reflect in the rise of France's far-right parties. These people are fiercely anti-immigration, and their fears often combine with racism, sometimes very publicly. Let me show you a headline. In 2020, 2 top doctors, French doctors, had a brainwave. Why not test the Wuhan virus vaccine in Africa? as if the continent is their testing lab. It tells you how ingrained racism is. And this attitude reflects in French policing. Black and Arab people are 20 times more likely to be stopped by cops, 20 times more than white people. In the last 3 years, there have been 21 fatal police shootings. Most of the victims were black or Arab. What does that tell you? Systemic racism exists in France, but it is unacknowledged and hence festering. The immigrant population often lives in ghettos. Their unemployment rate is 12% compared to the national average of 7%. Remember, this is an estimate. You can't know the real numbers because race-based surveys are illegal in this country. But you know what? France cannot keep hiding behind its revolutionary values. Those were created for a white Christian country. It doesn't reflect modern-day France. And don't forget, those ideas of equality and liberty only applied to the white Frenchmen. In the colonies, none of those applied. And that attitude persists to this day. Let me also tell you something you may not know. Some countries in West Africa still pay a special tax to France. They call it the colonial tax. These countries use CFA franc as their currency. So they're required to store 50% of their reserves with a French central bank. The CFA franc is pegged to the euro. On paper, this may seem harmless and mutual. But look at the optics. Former colonies are paying their colonizer. All of these factors have created major fault lines in France. There is fear, alienation, and desperation. It's the perfect cocktail for disaster. So now is a crucial moment in French history. Their leaders should accept that France has changed. They brought in people for cheap labor, among other things. Now they must make room for them. If not, the cycle of violence could continue. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Ukraine, they've released a new video of a strike on a Russian tank. This happened near the city of Bakhmut. In Mexico, a mayor married a crocodile. You heard that right. A mayor married a crocodile. As bizarre as it may sound, this is apparently a ritual that dates back centuries and is said to bring prosperity. In South Korea, a robot led a performance by the country's national orchestra. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1962, France declared the North African country of Algeria to be independent. This happened 2 days after an independence referendum was held. France ruled Algeria for 132 years. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. News.